So I'll just start at the top of the rehearsal. I noticed it was interesting that I read that you had a background in loyalty programs and hospitality. Hospitality, I know, has been hit hard with COVID, and there's probably a lot going on in that industry right now. But I'm wondering what you kind of learned from those programs, from from building or creating those kinds of client engagement strategies that you're applying now at your current company.
I started working with Sheraton hotels, pardon me, throughout university, and then I'd finished a degree, and I got offered the position to work as the loyalty programs coordinator for Starwood Preferred Guest, or SPG, which was Starwood Hotels Group thing that they introduced when they joined all their hotels together. And at the time, it was really revolutionary. So they had a thing called no blackout dates, and in loyalty program world land, you're probably used to that now. But when they did this way back when in the 90s, no one did it. Like to use your points was just excruciating. It was like dragging yourself across gravel. And so how did I transfer that to QLM? And that was about, firstly, it came down to our values. So when we realigned what our values were for the company, we have CARES values. So, and CARES is an acronym for consistency, accountability, respect, excellence, and sustainability. And each of those drives some behaviors. And then the second part of it was that in establishing a marketing department in a company that is a true marketing department, what they asked me to do was to go, well, number one, you've got two things that we do. We've got existing customers, so you need to have a customer care program. You have to be doing things for our existing customers, and the way you talk to them is different to the way that you talk to someone new. And then the second thing is that you've got a lead generation strategy, which is about what you say to people who don't know us. And that is different because, if I walk up to you in the bar, I don't say, "Hey, Darren, did you know that I love breeding finches?" And you're like, "Okay, this guy's creepy." Like, no context. Why are you doing this? Like, you need to have different ways of communicating, and having that heart. So we have a share the love thing, which is a theme that runs through a lot of what we do. And our marketing slogan is "Labels Alive." And our big thing is that we want to bring people's labels alive. And that means different things for different people, but it resonates because by saying it, we actually say to our sales teams, you've got to live this, you've got to live and breathe it, and you've got to take it into your customers and go, okay, what do you do? What makes you amazing? Or what makes you boring? And let's bring that alive and really look at it from an individual customer perspective.
It was interesting about Starwood and those giant corporations. They must have marketing plans 3 years down the road, probably longer. There's probably many components and parts. Um, ship like juxtaposing that kind of marketing approach with some of the stuff we're seeing for among print businesses, which doesn't look like that at all. Marketing is quite often, an afterthought really for a lot of um, for a lot of businesses of all kinds of sizes in the print world. Um, what do you think if you were talking to a printer who effectively really didn't have much of a marketing strategy, a really good reputation, word of mouth working well, but you could sit down with that person and say one thing, how does that person start to build? What's the most important thing to tell that person? Because I think, uh, although most companies that are going to watch this are farther along than this person I'm inventing, I do think there's sort of a need to go back to basics, with marketing in our industry.
I guess if I said to you, like, how do you start in marketing? Lots of people outsource it. And I was thinking about this because people often ask, why do you do it in house? And possibly we do it in house because I had a skill in that, and I was fortunate that someone said, look, we've got all these extra tasks that keep popping up, and we kind of want to give them to someone to stop distracting everyone else. Um, but I guess the difference in the approach we took was we went, well, what are people, having worked in sales and being, a really terrible salesperson, I was like, wow, I'm really shit at this. Like, this is really bad. So what am I missing here? What's the bit that I needed? And what do good salespeople do well? And I think what I was able to do with that is, instead of me going, well, I know everything, so I'm just going to siphon that into our marketing funnel, I went, what do people want? And you've got stakeholders, so those stakeholders vary. You've got suppliers, you've got yourself, you've got your customers, and you've got your employees, and then and investors usually. So you've got to please all those people. And for me, I was like, well, what do they want? And it came down to those three things we talked about before. You've got customer care. Existing customers want to have to make their sales grow. They want their business to grow. They want a product that suits what they do. And one of the things we look at is, well, what does that involve? The second part is, you've got to get new business. So your sales team are looking for opportunities for new customers or for growth with your existing customer base. And then the third thing is, you've got to have a way to show your company to the world and have a meaning behind what you do. And one of the really great things about me, and I say it a lot, is be true to who you are. As a company, QLM is different. Like we just operate in a way. We have a team of people who don't do a traditional sales model. Like, they are kind of heavily invested in our customers. We do have a very personal approach, and it's not that slick corporate thing. It's about having a bit of heart and a bit of involvement in customer bases. Now, it takes longer to do that, so you have to mix it up. But I would say to people, like, when you're going, two things with setting up a marketing idea, work out, have you got someone in-house who can do it? Because if you do, great, use them. Or if you can bring them in, because they will be more invested in what you're doing than an outsourced company usually. But you have to, and then it comes down to ROI. The awful truth for me is that we have to justify our existence. We have to demonstrate value. And I used to be able to do that anecdotally or through feel-good things, and now it's very much metrics based. So you've got to show that how much do you bring in, and where are you bringing in those leads, and how do your websites rate, and what's the interaction part. And I used to be a little bit scared by that, because I'm more of a touch and feel person. But now I think it's good, because what we're learning is what are the touch and feel things that are good and work, and what are the things that are just my ego or somebody else's ego driving a campaign rather than it really adding value.
I guess it sounds like a lot of your job is listening. How much of your listening happens inside to people inside the company, and how much of it is outside the company?
So it's a bit of both. Probably, I would say about 70-30. So 70% is outside of the company. I'm looking at industry trends. I'm looking at competitor activity. I'm looking at design innovations and material changes, and then just general business things, like what's happening in the business community, what are things that people are feeling, and then also asking customers and suppliers. Our supply chain is actually quite interesting. They have, they'll start usually with a supply chain. You'll see a product, but behind that product there's meaning. So what I do is I usually go, yeah, that's really great that you've got a new press or you've got new paper. Where did that motivation come from? Like, what's the story behind that? And that's the bit that ironically is rarely in what they show. But once you dig a little bit deeper into those people, you get really great stories, and that creates good content for people, because they go, oh, okay, this is how you got to that. Because it's just selling a product or just putting something out in someone's face. They're like, it's all interesting, but what's it going to mean to me, or what's the meaning behind this? And so internally we do the same thing. So we do a lot of we do all of our rollouts with staff first now. So harshest critics need to make sure that it's understandable, but also just so that we know that we're hitting the mark, or if people think that it's going to add value, because they're the people who are going to tell the story. And it's not just salespeople. This is across the company. We have Facebook groups, we have internal sites and internal training and material that we put around the factories on boards and stuff, and interact with QR codes, because we want them to get engaged with it.
How hard is it to educate the customers? Because I know on the interview that I saw at Fusion, even just the idea of sampling and teaching, and teaching may be kind of a harsh word. You're trying to teach your audience, but kind of explaining them like why digital is different and how it works. I mean, how hard is it for you?
Look, giving people awareness of possibilities and capabilities is how we position it. And the answer to the question is a lot of it has to do with the delivery, but also the openness of the person to receive it. And then it comes down to, one of the things we have learned is that we did this really cool campaign a couple of years ago to teach people about HP collage. So we had done a general thing and we'd told people about it, and people just could not understand it. They're like, collage is a craft term. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense. So we did a campaign where we showed people the yoga cows, and we did a milk label where each of the cows did different yoga poses and then they moved around. And so we sent that out to our sales. We did a whole training thing. We did little videos and we sent it out, and all the people went out with little sample labels and they went, "This is how it's done." And it was great. We got really good engagement and people were interested. But what we learned in that moment is that people needed to see their thing. It was really fascinating that people went, "That's great, but I don't sell cows and I don't like little caricatures. I don't, this is not my market segment." And so what we found was that then we had to go and create individual ideas. And the best example that we did was we had a client in Cambodia, and they asked for something as a fun thing. So we developed a design using collage, and we said, this is a really cool idea. And the result was this label here. So it's called Jason Kong Jin. And what we did was there were elements that remained static, and then everything else on the label moved. And when we mooted the idea with this client, they were just mortified. They were like, no. They have very strong brand identity, really strong brand guidelines, and they just could not comprehend that they couldn't control what they were doing. And so we had to show them the result. And so what we did was we did it anyway. We sent it to them and they put it up on their shelves and kind of ignored it. And people just kept pestering them. They were just like, "Can we buy that? That's beautiful. Can we have that?" And after a couple of months, she rang me up and she said, you're gonna laugh at me, but she said, "Everyone wants the bottle. We need to make this a real brand." And so through that, they developed an entirely new brand for their company. But it was because we created something that was them, that was their brand, it was their scenario. And that's a little bit more involved because, it means that if it's not a concept that people can see, you've really got to lead them through it. So one of the things that our marketing department has done that is really different to other companies is that we will offer, we have an ability for you to interact with the marketing team. And each of the salespeople has the opportunity to introduce a client or a project to us. And then we can work with the client, and we'll do it on we'll assess the project, have a look at it, work out, if it's feasible or not, and we'll run with the project for them. People are inherently in business conservative. They don't like to take risks. They don't like to change things. They want to know what's going to happen. And one of the things that we do a lot of is we take a risk. We have a bit of fun. We put stuff out there, and we do stuff. And it's quite funny because in Asia, Lunar New Year or Chinese New Year is really big, and so we embrace that. So every New Year we do something different. And when I first came here, I created something that was really kooky because everyone gives the same gift, and it's kind of like a thing. You give the same gift. It's like it's like cooking a turkey for Thanksgiving. That's what you do. So if you come up and do roast pork, everyone's going to be like, "Wow, what's going on? Like crazy man." But I was like, we have to show who we are and what we can offer, and that is that we can offer a different way to look at it. So every year for Lunar New Year, we come up with something different, and it's become the thing now because people, this year I was a bit, creatively tired, and I was like, oh, can we just do a plain box? And everyone was like, no, hell no, you've created this monster, you need to deliver. So so we do, we create, fun stuff and different stuff and little candy boxes that are kooky and have little horns and lucky money envelopes that stand up. And the funny thing is, usually these are really cheap and nasty red envelopes that are just flat, and they're really, and it's about buying it. And I was at the house of a friend in the middle of the countryside, and the grandmother, she said to me, she said the envelopes, then you give them to kids, but they're not designed for kids. Like the designs are all adults, and she's like, and they just lie flat. And she said, imagine if they stood up, because you're meant to keep the envelope all year. And so we went back and we changed our design from a grandma in the country, and everyone was like, people were just, they couldn't understand. They were just like, why would you change the design? That's crazy. And I'm like, because a grandma told me to do it, and she's right. But we had to show people. The other thing was that if you're going to take pork to Thanksgiving, you got to show people why it's better than turkey. Otherwise, everyone's leaving. So it's an interesting thing of when you're training. If you think of it as identifying individual opportunities, and we talk about that a lot. We go, look to people. What do they want to achieve? And does this fit? And as you take a generic idea out, look at them and go, how could they apply this to them? For every sales visit, especially with things that are personalized, how can they apply that to them? Don't think of it as this is a big idea, this is just cool technology. Look at them and go, okay, what can you do with this?
I love what you said about making an emotional connection. So much of the marketing materials I receive, let's take direct mail at home, for instance, is just telling me information, right? Like there's 20% off this cable deal this month, or just stuff I need to know. I got a recent direct mail piece that made me feel something for the first time, and I did not throw it away. So, and it's a perfect example of what you're talking about. This piece is so cool. You'll just love it. It was a giant postcard, like a giant oversized postcard, and the headline was, "If you choose not to call me for your pest needs, you can use this as a fly swatter." It was like this giant thing, and I'm like, wait a second. And it was this dude named Mosquito Joe, who was like this comedic figure who wanted you to like sort of laugh and call him, and it worked. Like we're calling Mosquito Joe because of this direct mail piece, and it's not a and it's digitally printed, but it's not in terms of customization or personalization. It wasn't anything more than an emotional connection. But I still love getting stuff like that, and I gotta think there's room for print clients to feel that way too because of print.
And an example I saw in Victoria was that there's a food company that's delivering, and they created these little cards, and I think they stuck like a sticker on it. But basically, Melbourne in Australia has gone into its like 5th or 6th lockdown, and they sent out a card with this picture of a cat, and it's the hang in there cat, but they'd made their own version, and so the hang in there cat is like this cat scratching down a wall, hanging on for dear life, and it said, dear Joe, hang in there, get 10% off your next order. And it just had their little logo on the collar of the cat. So subtle, but just like sent it out straight away to everyone on their database who shitty time. And some people go, oh well, that's opportunistic, but well, yeah, it is, but people have to eat, and if you can empathize with people and create, it's, to me, I'm like, I would buy their stuff. I would go, you know what, good for you, this is clever, this makes sense, you show me that you are understanding and that you're creating a cause. I'm not necessarily, when people send stuff out and it has nothing to do with me. Like I get, you know, interesting emails from people all the time, and this is the bit where, you know, in terms of marketing, you know, you asked the question before, Chris, why do we print samples? Like it's such an old-fashioned thing to do. People are almost embarrassed to admit that we print samples, but I'm like, this demonstrates how to use a, a stock in a way that nobody can do by talking about it or putting it on the web. When you touch it, when you feel it, when you get that little mosaic thing and you can pick them up and peel them off and stick them on a product, and especially if it's got your name on it, like especially if it's got something that connects you to it, then people love it. They go, this is my thing, you know. And we did this for, you know, for our teams. We created little personalized water bottles because no one was allowed to use shared water things anymore. So, you know, it was poignant, but it was also gave something that was personal. So, you know, it is that thing of the reason that tactile stuff with print works in a way that other things don't is that you physically receive it. And one of the beautiful things about receiving something, like having something to touch, is that it's just you usually. You know, when you get your box or you get your mail, you're in that moment with just yourself, and it creates an opportunity to either surprise, to reaffirm, or to make you smile. And I'm like, if you can do one of those things when you open up something from us, our goal is that you feel something, not that you know, and before you learn or before you whatever else, it's feel something. And you know, and we use little characters, and you know, and for Christmas we gave away little Christmas cakes. So we inserted little Christmas cakes that we bought from the you know, this local charity that make them, and we inserted them, and everyone got a little Christmas cake, and they were all personalized, so it had your name. And it's just a little finger cake, but all of our team was mosaiced, sorry, not mosaiced, collaged on the thing, so they all moved around on the actual design, and it was just hilarious because it was one of those kooky things where staff thought it was funny, you know, customers thought it was funny, it was easy, and it's something that, you know, you could have a bit of fun with. And if you can create that little moment, you know, it's a $2 gift, but it's worth so much more than $2, as opposed to some people, we buy stuff that's not personal and it's, you know, it's 30, 40, $50, and people, you know, they don't feel anything. And I'm like, if you give something to someone and they don't feel something, it's more about you and less about them. And I think that loses the point of what print technology can do.
What was the most surprising promotion that you did? Like, which one surprised you with the results? Which one created the most buzz, or you know, just kind of what did more than you thought, or the reverse? Which one didn't do as much as you thought?
The Jason Kong gin bottle, I think, reaffirmed to me a couple of things. It showed that if you see something in a client and you demonstrate it to them, and then let them ruminate on it, then what because they didn't change their opinion, people changed it for them. You know, the fact that they left it in the bar, and people kept coming in and saying, oh, what's that, and their other products are absolutely exquisite. They're the most beautiful, you know, expensive looking premium spirits, and this thing is a crazy jungle print with a big fat Jason Kong thing on it. And this was the thing that it gave a point of interest. It was fun, and it was completely different to their other range. And so it created a buzz and a hype for them that I really liked. I liked that in addition to what they did, which is a really great thing, it gave them something else really cool.
Yeah, it sounds like that kind of project, anyone would probably agree resonates with almost everyone, right? But is there ever a disconnect between, say, what sales or someone else at the company internally is wants you to convey. This is the greatest label in the history of the world for these 9 reasons. These are the benefits that we want you to articulate versus having an audience feel something. Do you ever have to sort of change what you're sort of required to say about a product? Is there ever a disconnect between sales and marketing when it comes to like what to tell an audience? Because you're talking about how you want them to feel, all of the correct marketing best practices, but I know that we've talked to some sales leaders who they need to get their 4 things out, and they don't really don't not worried about emotion. They're worried about the 4 benefits on the
Yeah.
the chart that they have in front of them.
Oh, look, and as a company, you know, and I'm a terrible salesperson because I don't start with that in mind, and obviously that's a really important part of any business's operation is you've got to make a profit. You know, people decry it that but you have to be sustainable. So I understand it, and I get it. I think where the separation of the marketing and we have what's called an ideas lab. So if you come to the marketing department, we have an ideas lab, and this is the lab where we bubble over, and I'm the mad professor, and our team, and it sounds like me, but there's actually a bunch of people who are making these things come to life, and they bring them alive, but we are a crazy little team. We are passionate, and we look at it, and I think the difference with me now is that I go, there has to be a commercial sensibility, and I've always kind of had that in the back of my mind that with all of these ideas, there's a commercial sensibility. There's a commercial sensibility from our perspective in that you have to be able to make money from it, and it has to drive sales. And I've done some really really cool campaigns where I've created something that I just thought was the bomb, and it didn't sell more product. And so, for me, it's a fail, irrespective of how beautiful the project looked. But what we do, I guess, with all of these things is we introduce more than just unit cost. For me, it's about creating connection, creating brand loyalty, creating these tribes of people who will promote your product, and what's the opportunity to enhance your brand. Mosquitoes Joe is going to go off the chart when every single person in the US is going to go, oh my God, I've got mosquitoes. Who is Mosquito Joe? Are they in my area? So, if you create that tribal feel, that's good. But I understand your point. You still have to understand it has to be commercially viable, and it has to demonstrate value. So if you're going to pay more for a unit cost for a label, it has to coincide with an ROI, because that ROI underlines all of these marketing and sales
Yeah,
activities.
that makes a lot of sense. Hey, Lindsay, you mentioned an idea lab. Is this an actual physical place? Do you close the door behind you in the idea lab? What does it look like?
It's a place where you can dump the kids and let them play, and the kids started off as being our sales teams, and then it became clients, and so we have those spaces. The ideas lab is possibly a combination of that space, and also I guess a metaphor for really deep diving into what is it that this customer wants to achieve. These ideas of the lab is that you create the ideas, and hopefully you get stuff that works and you get stuff that don't. And I guess what I'm learning from this process is that you don't always nail it first time with every client. You obviously want to, because there's a business imperative to get the brief right. You don't want to disappoint yourself or disappoint the client, but having a space where people can come in. The idea of the lab is to create a space and a client experience space, and we call it client experience space because we want them to come in and we want them to look and just be open to possibilities, and then we take it down and we hone in on what's the thing that's going to drive value into their business.
I think the secret too is to take, if you have an innate sense that this is a really good idea, to blow it up. Blow it up. Like take the risk and go for it to the nth degree. Seems like a better answer than trying to come up with 3 or 4 other mini good ideas. You know, um, I feel like we should double down on the ones that we know have something behind them.
you have to invest a whole heap. So we have a really interesting idea that we do in our when we do pitch ideas to people, and we always give the client what they ask for, number one. Number two is we give them what we think they want or what we think will work best for them. And then the third idea is what we call the mule. And the mule is it's based on a very old US terminology where a mule won a horse race in the US, and it caused a big kerfuffle because it won when it should never, and so the racing industry actually banned mules. So it's quite interesting from a US history perspective, because it comes from that idea of sometimes the rogue is actually what someone will go with, and it's the winner. So we produce something that's completely off the wall, a little bit crazy, and if anyone ever says out of the box, I'm like, no, we never say that. It's like, it has to be, it's not out of the box, it's just go crazy, put something on the table that is really weird and interesting. And this was a mule. So to give you an idea of where sometimes those things are the winners, is that this was nothing like what the client asked for. They asked for something really specific and very sophisticated and demure, but it's an interesting way to come back to people, because obviously in my head I go what the client asked for, what we think they should go with, and that's the one that we pour most of our energy into, because we're like, we've listened, we're looking at it and try and make sure that you give people what they want, but that it's delivered in a way that's going to drive value into their business.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay, for sitting with us today. It was fantastic. Appreciate all your insights.
Thanks for having me on Unvarnished. Thanks,
it was
guys.
A pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.